Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 19th Special Board of Works meeting. Our first order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you for leading us, Alan. Appreciate that. Next, we'll move on to the roll call of members. Madam Clerk, will call the roll.
Mayor Gentry.
Present.
Jane Taylor is absent today. Bill Stoner.
Present.
Dick Robertson.
Here.
Alan Milburn.
Present.
Thank you.
Since this is a special Board of Works meeting, we will not be approving the minutes from our previous meeting. And move on directly now to old business. So the only item we have up here tonight is consideration of award of base bid for downtown streetscape and Big Four Trail project. We'll turn that over to City Engineer Kevin Krulik to introduce.
Thank you and good evening. As you may recall, we were here a week ago and opened bids for our downtown project, and obviously it was not the night we'd hoped for. We only had one bid to open, and that bid was a little bit higher than our engineer's estimate. But after review of that estimate, review of the bid documents that were submitted, verifying some references on the contractor, we feel ready tonight to ask for your authorization to move forward with the base bid only of that project. The alternates, if I guess back up a minute, the project consisted of, as you probably know, but for the public's benefit, consisted of a base bid that was 3 sides of the courthouse square: Washington, Meridian, and Main Street, in addition to intersection improvements at Main and 39, Washington and 39, and intersection improvements at State Road 32 and Meridian. Those intersection improvements primarily had to do with the reconstruction of the traffic light signals, reconstructing those with decorative materials, as well as then taking care of some curb geometry in those intersections. But the primary goal was to reconstruct the intersections with decorative material.
Kevin?
Yes.
Did that not include that first block of Main Street West?
Yep, I'm getting there. It also did include the first block of Main Street west of 39. Right. So the intersection of 39 was included. All of Main Street, when I say all, the entire width of the right-of-way of Main Street from State Road 39 west to and including the intersection of West Street. Okay. So what we have is the 3 blocks around the square, 1 block west of the square on Main Street, okay. And then the only other thing outlying of that would be the intersection of 32 and Meridian Street. So that was the base bid. The alternate bid was for the remainder of Main Street west of the intersection of West Street to the west to and including the intersection of Patterson Street, and then a street overlay of Patterson Street in addition to the construction of the Big Four Trail north to the intersection with the old railroad right-of-way where it would connect to the existing terminus point of the Big Four Trail. So that was how the bid form was structured. Base bid essentially around the square, alternate bid West Main Street. There was a further alternate that was required in the bid package, and that was to allow the contractor some more flexibility associated with schedule. We had heard throughout the bidding process that the schedule, although feasible, was aggressive. And so to avoid contractors that might be leery of such an aggressive timeline, we provided an alternate whereby if the contractor could show that they could provide an alternate schedule whereby our goals would still be met, which is maintaining vehicular access, maintaining access to the businesses on the square, and completing the project in this construction season, that they could submit an alternate schedule and a deduct to relieve them from our perhaps more aggressive, more structured, phased schedule of the project around the square. So White Construction did fill out that portion of the bid form, so their deduct alternate included a savings of $200,000. Their base bid was $7,193,000. Their alternate bid was $4,193,000. And then again, to accept their alternate schedule would be a deduct of the base bid only of $200,000. So I stand before you tonight recommending several things, but to break this down, that we would execute and award the base bid of the contract with the contingency that bonding will have to be approved by the Redevelopment Commission, revised bonding because of the structure change in the bid package, as well as the sale of those bonds. So we were asked for any approval tonight would be contingent on RDC approval and sale of the bonds. And no notice to proceed would be issued until those prerequisites occurred. So if we can get into some of the details of the bid. I think that might be helpful, why we're choosing this.
Kevin, can I ask one question first?
Absolutely.
Are we going to consider this alternate of the schedule? Is that something, what do you think? Is that something you think we should consider or not consider? Or?
I don't think so. In my opinion, $200,000 is not worth the trouble of giving up our schedule. Our schedule was crafted around the mentality that we were going to do one side of the square at a time, that we were going to not touch the other sides with the exception of utility work, but then we would take one side out of commission at a time as we systematically worked. And you couldn't complete, or you couldn't move on to Meridian Street until you completed Main Street. You couldn't move on to Washington Street until you completed and opened up Meridian Street. So you had to systematically work around the square.
How's it going to work with them as they cannot open up the other side? What's that going to do for them in staging equipment, that sort of thing, to use on the next block?
Understood. Well, there would have the ability to possibly be in those other sides of the square, but they would have to maintain traffic and the parking at all times. But from a purely construction staging standpoint, we had a couple of areas that we were willing to dedicate towards the project for use. One would be the parking lot of the former Bill Estes dealership for employee parking for their contractors, their subcontractors, their employees. The area behind the canopy on the former dealership site would be available for construction staging for materials. And then there's also another lot, which is the lot that's immediately south of the police station on East Main Street. We've already coordinated with Chief Warmoth. He basically uses that south lot for the storage of excess vehicles. They have plenty of capacity in their eastern lot, and that's really where they operate their policing operations, is out of that eastern lot. So he was more than happy to vacate that southern lot, allow that for construction staging, and provided that the contractor would have to restore that lot if any damage occurred to it during construction. So
just for the public's concern, I think, because we only had one bidder, do you think maybe the aggressive schedule might have been a reason why we did not get any more bidders? I'm just throwing something out there so the public could understand maybe why we didn't get any other. Okay?
It's a fair question. You know, and to truly quantify all the reasons, obviously I can't speak entirely for the contractors, and I certainly can't speak for the contractors that didn't submit bids. I have reached out to them, but I haven't really received any information back from them. I have talked a lot with White Construction about the project. They did not feel as though, again, they felt the schedule was aggressive but feasible. They felt they had a plan to complete the schedule, and I did ask them if there was any increases in their bid due to what they might foresee as a liquidated damages type of situation, where they couldn't meet the schedule and would be forced to pay the city liquidated damages. They stated to me that they had no built-in damages on their contract. The other thing I would also point out is they had the opportunity to submit a revised schedule that they created and provide a deduct. And that deduct was only $200,000. So you could draw the conclusion that if there was anything in the schedule that was too aggressive, it could really probably only be amounted to about a $200,000 premium. Again, I don't know how the other contractors viewed it. Certainly, we heard the same thing from other contractors, aggressive but feasible. So I can't really speak to that. I think just speaking in general, the construction market right now is very busy, is very aggressive. In the last year, I think we've seen a real increase of both private and public capital available for construction projects. You know, we've talked about the community crossings projects. We've talked about the other transportation funding that the state came up with last year. So there's a lot of money out there for public municipal infrastructure projects. And I think probably the biggest thing that you're also seeing right now is there's a real resurgence in the private development world for construction projects. So again, a lot of work out there. Maybe we were down a few on contractors that didn't quite make it through the recession. So you might not be seen as an aggressive of a pricing situation from contractors at this point because there's more than enough work to go around. We certainly saw a bit of a decreased level of interest at our pre-bid meeting. We really only had 4 general contractors at the meeting that would be qualified bidders, in my opinion. So that was a little less than we would have hoped to see. Granted, you could also account that the project is complicated. It is a complex project with a lot of pieces involved, a lot of decorative pieces. So again, if you couple that with the fact that there's a lot more money for infrastructure out there, maybe contractors took a pass on what would be an otherwise complicated project to go after an abundance of other public work that's out there.
Okay.
Again, I'm speculating.
I know. I just thought, I'm glad you did because that lets people at home.
Yeah, I think it's important to let them know the process we went through.
Because we only had one bidder, they need to know.
Yep. I will say also that we saw on NDOT's, so obviously NDOT is letting a lot of work this time of year. Their January construction letting, where they let all their projects most of their projects for the coming year, saw about 40% of the bids submitted above their engineers' estimates. So again, I think we're seeing a construction industry that has got a lot of opportunities out there, a lot more access to capital on the private and municipal side of things. And so I don't think contractors are being aggressive as they were, say, throughout the recession, where they were trying to make sure they secured work to keep their crews busy. I think those days are past, and we're seeing a return to more, I guess, traditional bidding practices. Again, that's my opinion. Everybody's got opinions, but that's kind of what I'm putting together. So, so again, we opened the bid package, and the bid package was, as I said, it was $7,193,000 for the base bid, and $4,193,000 for the second bid. One of the things that I wanted to point out to people, so in the middle of the screen there is the white construction breakdown, base bid and alternate. This does not represent the deduct alternate, that was left off. To the left there, where you see the column that says total cost at the top, that is the original construction estimate from our engineer. So you can see a total down at the bottom at $9,333,000. What I want to show you here is something that I thought was very interesting. So you can see now at the left side of the screen, you can see 4 line items there that I've broken out. Construction engineering, mobilization and demobilization, clearing of right-of-way, and maintaining traffic. These items are lump sum administrative parts of any construction project. These are the items that are a little harder for us to quantify because every contractor takes a different approach to how they would foresee these expenses. White Construction has, by their recognition and I guess some history there, they typically load those administrative costs maybe a little higher than some other contractors do. That's just a business preference for them. But what I would say here is that when you look at the far right, that total cost under the construction bid, and you look at the left, the total construction cost of the engineer's estimate, you see some pretty big discrepancies. You see construction engineering, that's essentially staking, of $86,000 estimated in our construction cost estimate from the engineer, compared to $806,000 for the White Construction bid. Going down the line, mobilization and demobilization, the moving onto the site, the moving off of the site, $216,000 estimated. And these were estimated really, I don't feel these were necessarily underestimated. Perhaps in hindsight, obviously they look underestimated, but these were kind of based on standard averages you see in the construction world. But you can compare that $216,000 move in, move out number to $700,000 in their number. Clearing of right-of-way, again, $86,000 compared to $588,000. Maintaining traffic, a big difference, $170,000 versus $950,000. So you can see the percent increases over there just on the edge of the screen. Those percent increases range from 224% to 835%. That is where the real difference is in the numbers. The line-by-line items in the construction bid, and there's 250 line items, they compare very well with the costs in our engineer's estimate. So really what I would say is you see an increase in the administrative costs. Again, why is that? It may be attributed to some of the things that I outlined earlier, but obviously we'll never fully know how they build those numbers. So what I am proposing is that we execute that base bid. This is another spreadsheet that looks somewhat similar, but the only difference that I will point out here is zoom out, not to zoom too far. So you can see the base bid there. The line items in the original estimate to the left. So you see the city right-of-way improvements at the top. Now I should point out that is the total project, this $7 million. That is not just the base bid. So please don't compare $7 million to $4 million and think we're getting a deal. That $7 million is all construction costs within the right-of-way. I don't have that one necessarily broken out for you. The other costs are associated with work on the courthouse property, work in the NDOT intersections, work at in the new right-of-way that we've acquired on the corner of the jail property. You can see here, though, when you compare those, again, trying to show you that the construction costs really aren't that far off. The jail property improvements estimated $6,400, actual $9,400. The NDOT intersections, the State Road 32 intersection, $367,000. versus 321. Both intersections on 39, 766 versus 664. The courthouse improvements, $1,040,000 versus $1.7 million. So again, I don't feel that the construction cost is what's really driving this up. Looking over here, these numbers here are for construction inspection and construction contingency. Contingency isn't a real line item per se. That's just a safety net for us as inevitable situations come up in any construction practice, especially in a downtown situation where we don't know. We don't know what we're going to find once we get under the street. We don't know what kind of historic structures might be there. Inevitably, there will be change orders, and I've assumed a 10% contingency for that. Again, we don't know exactly what that'll end up being. So our number goes from the $7,193,000 that is proposed for the base bid, and that's what I'm proposing we award tonight. We've got another 1.2 million in city costs associated with the project. And those aren't drastically different from what we've assumed in the past. Keep in mind that the 9 million number that we saw earlier, and it's on that sheet as well from the engineer's estimate, never included construction, inspection, or contingency. But those numbers were included the total original bond issuance of about 10.9 million. So I know that's a lot of numbers to throw at you, but ultimately tonight I am asking for a motion to award the base bid contingent on RDC approval and the sale of bonds. For the base bid only, you might ask, what are we going to do about the alternate bid? Well, what I would like to do about the alternate bid is repackage that and rebid the alternate phase of the project as a phase 2. If you might remember, the construction schedule of the project didn't have us doing any alternate work until the spring of 2019 anyway. It was to be started in the spring of 2019 and completed in the summer of 2019. And I would sit here today and say we can still do that. What I would say is we need to get started on the downtown. It's a complicated project. I don't feel bad about the construction numbers that we have. I would recommend executing that, repackaging the alternate as a phase 2, rebidding that this fall, generally where you would see more aggressive pricing from contractors as they're beginning to line up work for the following year. And we still may be on a schedule to complete the base and the alternate in the original schedule, which is by the end of next summer. So that would be my recommendation. Now, the alternate bid was $4 million per the White construction bid. I think that's a high number. I think we can see numbers quite a bit more aggressive than that. $4 million is essentially what we're paying for the construction of East Street, and this is nowhere near as large of a project as East Street. So I'm hopeful that we would see significant reduction in that if we rebid it. We would also see a reduction in the fact that the alternate is really a standard road construction project like East Street, with the exception of the utility infrastructure work that is on East Street. So I'm hopeful that we would see more aggressive pricing there. We would see more traditional road contractors go after that project, and hopefully that number comes down to get us closer to our 10.9 million total project that we had hoped for. Right now, as it stands, if we were to do base and alternate, we'd be talking about a $13.3 million project. That includes all the monies that we would have in there for contingency and inspection. So the total inspection, if we were to do both projects, would be about $750,000, and the total contingency that I would want to carry would be about $1.1 million. Again, contingency is just for the what-if situation. So with all that, what other questions can I answer for you?
Kevin, go back to the first 2 pages that you were showing us. The construction engineering, mowed, demowed, cleaning, or clearing right away and maintaining traffic.
Yes.
Is that for the whole project? Or is that just
the total
base
that
bid?
you're seeing there at the right, under total cost, yes, those are total. That is an addition of the previous 2 columns, which would say base bid and alternate at the top. So,
okay.
For example, construction
Okay,
engineering for the base bid is $500,000. Construction engineering for the alternate is $306,686.
Okay.
Any other questions? Rob, I missed anything from a legal standpoint?
No, I think, Kevin, just to be clear, your recommendation, and you found that White Construction was responsive and responsible?
Yes, thank you. Yes, White Construction, after reviewing the bid documents that they've submitted, we feel they are responsible and responsive. I have checked with references for other municipalities that are currently using them, and have found no concerns in those conversations.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
No.
Any questions, comment from the public? Feel free. Please state your name for the record as well. State your name for the record.
I'm Sandra Breedlove, and I live on 300 North. I brought up the fact that the way I understand it, that the project is going to cost $25,300,000 over a period of possibly 23 years. Is that correct?
I don't have those numbers in front of me.
The total construction bid that we have in front of you right now is about $13.4 million. I think
This is the bonds.
I think Mrs. Breedlove is probably referring to the debt cost associated with the bonds. I couldn't speak to that, though.
Okay. I don't have that information in front of me, Sandra.
It was in the paper with the bond information, okay? I was astounded when I read that for a project for about the price that you're talking about construction for being the cost of the project. That much payback over $15 million just for the bonds to pay back for a project that he has been describing, and that cost seemed very extreme for a small town of, I don't know, is it 16,000 people now? I attended meetings. Well, I went to the meeting the first meeting about this project, but I had to leave early. I went to the 4-H meeting and brought up the fact that TIFs don't pay city expenses. And there was a short description of a TIF, and that then the income from the TIF taxes went to the state. The income from the taxes in a TIF goes to the TIF fund for further development. And the citizens that are not in the TIF, the businesses that are not in the TIF, are picking up all of the expenses, while the taxes in the TIF just pay for further development. So this is like $25,300,000, and it's for the downtown area. However, there are citizens and businesses that in the meantime are paying the expenses of the city. So for that much expense, there needs to be a referendum, because the citizens that are helping to pay the bills have a right to something too. They have a right perhaps to even have debt paid down. And it seems like this is a long payout period. Another question that I have a question about, if there is not $1,100,000 in payment, this was in the paper, for the debt each year, which was coming from the industrial TIF, that there would be, the way I understood it, it's called the project, is that correct? That you're doing downtown?
Yeah.
That there would be some kind of an assessment on the project. The way I understand it, the TIF businesses that were put into the TIF, theirs will continue to pay taxes to the city because that was their base amount when they went into the TIF. Is that correct?
So when the TIF district is created,
Right.
So let's say there's a farm field, cornfield, right? When
Right.
it's just open land, right? It assesses for, say, $10,000. Someone comes in and on that cornfield builds a, $40 million factory.
Mm-hmm.
So when the cornfield was put into the TIF district, the $10,000 that they paid in taxes on that cornfield still go to the city.
Right.
And still go to support police
So
and
all
fire.
of these city...
Let me finish
Oh,
your
I'm
question.
sorry. I thought we were finished.
So, once the factory is then constructed, right, that increment, that's the I in the TIF, the increment of that $40 million, that is whatever taxes that are paid, property taxes that are paid on that building goes to that's under the purview of the Redevelopment Commission, which manages the TIF districts, which is the RDC, and that increment is what the RDC uses to fund projects like this that we're talking about, the downtown.
Yeah.
Now, TIFs have a lifespan, so after that lifespan is completed, the 25 years or whatever it's set up to be when it started, because now all TIF districts have to have a lifespan now, that increment, that $40 million, so it's now $40 million and $10,000 because it's a $40 million building on top of $10,000 worth of land, that increment now then goes back to the city after that life cycle of that TIF is completed.
So, because the 10,000, the base amount when it went in, right?
Correct. That's
That goes into the city expenses, correct?
Correct.
And the 40 million goes to the TIF for development, right?
Correct. And
Yeah, the tax.
the taxes of it. Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason however, though, that the redevelopment commission funds that are the taxes collected on that $40 million building, all of those revenues have to be spent in ways that benefit the district itself. Mm-hmm. So you can't you can't do certain things with it, right? You can't pay down school debt. You can't reduce the city's property tax rates. I mean, you can't do certain things with that money. They have to be spent in ways to benefit the TIF district. They have to go back to feed back the district. And so we've been able to draw a connection between the business park and the downtown, which is why we're able to use TIF funds to fund this downtown project, which means that, now you don't live in the city, so you're not paying city property taxes, but everyone else that lives in the city, no one in the city is seeing an increase of their city property tax rate on what I pay on my house or what any of these people pay on their house. They're not seeing an increase of 1 penny on the rate for what they pay for property taxes to fund this project. All of it is being funded out of redevelopment commission funds to make it happen.
Almost everybody I talked to got a tax increase from last year,
they didn't,
and that's assessment increase. So they get,
well,
increases one way or the other. And
well,
it seems strange that everybody I talked to got an
So let me stop you there.
increase.
Hold on a second. So the city doesn't do anything about assessments, right? That's the county assessor is the one that assesses property and determines what properties are valued at. Now, so the city has no control over what properties assessed for. Mm-hmm. The only thing the city can control, and Dick Robertson, the city councilman, we've worked very hard for the last 2 years, we can only control the rate of what the property tax rate for the city is. Some properties go up, some properties go down, right? So if you hold the rate the same, that's the best we can do from a city perspective. And I think the city property tax rate has been frozen since 2015. So the city is not increasing your taxes. I'm not saying your house is maybe not worth more, you're paying more taxes on that. That's a possibility. Now granted, you're not in the city, so you're not seeing that. But from a city perspective, the rate is exactly the same. exactly the same.
Okay.
So any increases are either coming from other taxing districts, right? So the schools can tax you, the counties can tax you, the library can tax you. So those are different taxing units that make up our overall quote unquote property tax rate. However, the city tax rate is exactly what it was 3 years ago.
Okay. The meeting building for the high school, when it was remodeled, was paid for out of TIF, right?
Correct.
There was a fire station being paid for out of TIF, right?
Correct.
So it can pay for other things.
Well, the connection with those, right, is that fire station serves the business park, right? So again, it's benefiting the TIF.
Yes.
The school project, which happened before I was here, so I don't make the determination on why it was done, but the determination was that event space would benefit the businesses in the TIF district to whatever amount that they were able to contribute to that project. So you have to be able to draw a connection between the park, the district, and the project is going to benefit.
Okay. Greater Clark, have you heard of that? They get 10% of TIF funds. That was in the paper. So there are ways to get TIF, and we're working with the schools, but they get 10% of the TIF funds. So that is a doable thing, okay? It was in the Indianapolis Star, okay? My thinking is that because of the extreme amount of the bonds, as I've already told you, the payback for the amount of the cost of the project being done, there needs to be a referendum with all the other taxpayers that are paying the city expenses for the TIF. They're actually picking up city expenses for the TIF. The TIF uses police. They use firemen. They have a city building that has employees that get wages from the taxes, and they get benefits from the taxes, and there's probably lots of other things that they pay taxes on. And so you could have a referendum and then look into Greater Clark for at least getting 10% to help with their schools. That involves 3 areas in the Greater Clark area. And do something for the people that have been paying their taxes to support the city expenses all this time. If you're going to spend $25,300,000 for a project over a period of 21 years. And if there isn't $1,100,000 available, it's going to be assessed on the project. How is that going? What kind of thing? Is it going to be taxed on to the area of the project?
I don't know what you're referencing in that.
It's in the paper.
Okay. She's talking about if there's not enough money in the TIF to make the payment, $1 million payment, what's the backup plan is that it's going to be sponsored by property taxes if that's not going, if there's not enough in the TIF to do that.
Okay.
So yeah, if that would happen, yes, there'd be
however, based on our financial advisors, there's no
increase in the property taxes to help cover.
But we don't.
Payment.
But there's based on what the way it's structured, there's no. I mean, those buildings are going to be there. So there's no foreseen shortfall there from a funding perspective.
Yeah, Mrs. Breedlove, the only way that would happen would be, the only way that could happen would be the business park would actually die today. Right now, there's enough in the business park right now today to help fund this project for probably the next 10 years.
Well, no, it's actually is based on we cannot bond off of future possible investments, right?
Yeah.
So what's out there today is enough to support this project for the lifespan of the bond.
Okay,
so
but-
there's no, so.
Oh,
and
I'm sorry.
so if we add a new companies in, I mean, as it continues to grow, I mean, it actually would have to completely go away where we would ever reach a point.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's some companies that go off in 20 years, some properties. I think it's 20 years, not 25.
Yeah, thank you.
The limit is, and so they'll go off, but as new business come in, they'll go in and keep adding on to the TIF and to keep that process going, but. Yeah,
And that's what we talked about,
We've
where-
got to have it in there now to cover it for the whole length of
You,
time.
I mean,
You have enough
When-
in there now to
when-
cover it for the 23 years?
yes,
Why don't you pay more then and cut down the interest on the bonds?
it's similar to buying a home, right?
It's similar to what?
Buying a home, right?
When you pay interest, you burn your money. That's what happens.
and
And you're burning your taxpayers' money.
It's just like, the mayor was kind of good, it's just like buying a house. You have
Yeah.
interest on your home,
You're right.
and you pay interest on that. It's the
Yeah.
same thing here. We're borrowing money, we're paying interest on that money.
Yeah, you're paying $15,300,000.
But the city or the residents of Lebanon are not being affected by borrowing the money from the TIF, because the money was never there to start with. So they're not being affected at all. The money, like the mayor said, talked about the base, you always get the base until the TIF runs out on that piece of property.
then it gets
Then
added
you
to
get
the
whole thing at
general.
that point.
Okay,
And
what's
there's
the-
several
oh.
businesses out there now that we're getting the whole thing on. Not every building out there is on TIF out there.
What kind of restraints, though, are on further development that are going to increase cost in that TIF? Have you set up a structure for that so that that doesn't happen, that there were always going to be money available from coming in from that TIF that's not being spent on further development in the TIF to protect that payment?
I'm not sure what you're trying to get at with that question.
You're saying there's going to be $1,100,000 available every year.
Yes.
Okay. TIF money is for further development in the TIF. Have you set up a structure so that you're going to be insured like for at least 3 years down the road? There's going to be money for that. 5 years down the road, there's going to be money for that.
Yes,
Instead of putting the taxes on the project people, and the project people don't all know that that's there. They need to all be informed, because I just got through talking to somebody in the project yesterday. They said, well, we didn't know that was there. So have you met with all the project members?
The property tax backup there is as a worst case, natural disaster. It's there as a backup, but it's based on everything we've worked through with our financial advisor on Ball. They've analyzed our TIF district. They've analyzed where we are from a tax revenue perspective. There is zero concern about the TIF district not being there able to pay its bills.
Right. But there's no structure in place to
We
have it set up down the road that it's going to be there for the next 3 years.
There is a structure. It's the businesses that are there are the ones that pay the revenue on it, right? So I mean, as long as and it's not even on the companies, it's the buildings. As long as the buildings are still there, they pay the taxes to get it there.
So the developers, if they want to use money for further development, is there going to be restraints on the amount that they can spend for further development that make sure that that's going to be available?
Yes, there's always a debt obligation for our TIF district, right? So we know how much comes in, what we can use, and how much is available. We also have cash balances in the RDC if we needed to pay cash for something. So we do have that, but we don't have $7 million lying around in the TIF district just to pay it. Now, I don't think that would be a wise investment of city resources to just say, hey, well, you would have to spend 7 years just to collect all of the revenue to do it. In the meantime, the project never happens. So I think I understand your point, I understand what you're getting at, and you're concerned about the interest being paid. However, from a community development perspective, you have to make those investments in order to build a community to keep Lebanon active and thriving and wanting people want to live here. So I understand your concern, but I also think.
But it is written that it has to be a payment for 23 years, right?
So
it's going to be $15,300,000.
It's a way that, the way to think about this, right? This is a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
This is a mortgage, yes.
You can pay mortgage if you go into a mortgage, you can pay it off as soon as you have the money to pay it.
I didn't say it's exactly like a mortgage. It's like a mortgage, but with a bond, you can't do the prepayments and things like that unless it's built into the contract. So this is how bonding works from a city perspective. From a municipal.
Okay, well, you need to have an article in the paper that this altogether is going to cost for the expense for financial expense of it, the $25,300,000 project for whatever your expense is going to be, and let the people know it. And I really think a referendum. So I did not hear the information at the 4-H building that TIFs don't pay city expenses. I did not hear it when I talked to President the high school superintendent, the superintendent.
Dr. Taylor?
I brought it up there. And I told him I had a paper from the city treasurer that the TIFs themselves, I know that there's the base amount that pays taxes do not pay. The TIFs themselves do not pay taxes for this city. And I've talked to other people, and they don't know that that's happening either. So he should have gone ahead and explained it and let people know. It was a public meeting that the citizens are paying for the city expenses and the TIFs aren't. And they need to share in that financial benefit, just like the downtown area is.
All right, thank you, Sandra.
For the citizens. And have you thought about what's coming up with the federal government with spending this kind of money? $20 trillion, plus they took out $6 trillion worth of treasuries. They're all coming up.
I think we're a little off of what we're...
No, you're not off. You're not out of the country. You're still in this country, Mayor Gentry.
No, but I'm saying from a public comment standpoint, so.
I beg your pardon?
Sandra, I'd be more than happy to sit down and talk with you. I know we've met before. We've talked for several hours about this, and
Not several hours. We've talked some, but...
I think if we have, but I mean, I understand I understand your perspective, and I understand your concerns.
Yeah, I care about all the people in Lebanon, and they deserve to know what's going on. They deserve to know the total amount being spent, and it needs to be in the paper.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Is there any other public comment that would like to?
Didn't that get in the paper?
I beg your pardon?
I think didn't some of that?
The 20, it was in the legals, but people just don't read the legals.
Yeah, so it was in the
I read
paper.
the legals every day.
Yeah.
That's the paper.
I beg your pardon?
That is the paper.
Yeah, I know, but nobody that I've talked to knows about it. You have Umball.
Sandra, is there any other public comment concerning this?
I have a paper from where there's been an evaluation.
Sandra,
and Umball is mentioned. Do you want the papers, all of you, to know so you're informed?
Sandra, we've seen that before. I've seen you've shared your Michael.
No,
Hicks.
this is not the same paper. You haven't seen this paper. Wouldn't you like to be informed, Mayor Gentry?
Have you got copies?
I sure have.
Feel free to share them with the board then if you'd like.
You what?
Feel free if you'd like to share with the
If
board.
you'd like to give us a copy, it'd be fine.
Yeah.
Would I what?
Yes, we'd like a copy.
Oh, good.
Sure.
So Sandra, I think we've talked for more than 20 minutes on this.
Well, it's all been very pertinent, I think, for people that don't know, don't you?
Kevin, anything you want to say to wrap up the?
Wrap it up.
No, I would say, to kind of come off of what Sharon was saying, the total debt service, is in that ballpark when you consider all insurance and fees and interest associated with the bond payments. I will also point out another nice big number. It's $35.5 million. That's the estimated increment that we will get off of the TIF district today over the next 25 years. So how do we pay for $25 million? We pay for it because there will be $35 million there to do it. So I would also point out, I think at the last calculation we did, which was a few years ago, the TIF district pays 43% of the city taxes on services. So they pay all the services you're referring to. So
The business park
the
that
business
has,
park
where they've
pays the
rolled off.
lion's share of police, fire, city services, not the citizens.
Okay. All right, with that,
Well, I asked for those figures, and what that doesn't G with that the TIF pays none of the city expenses. But you're saying that they do.
No. You can't confuse the two things. The TIF district, the
Right.
taxes that are paid in the TIF district, there is the increment that goes into the redevelopment commission fund.
Right.
There is the taxes that also come back to the city, the
Right.
base taxes that they
Right.
pay. The base taxes that they pay pays over 40% of the city expenses.
Because remember the lifespan of buildings, right? So we've talked about the lifespan of TIF districts. So some of those buildings are more than 20 years old, right? So when they hit the 20-year-old mark, that increment, then that goes back into the city general fund.
Oh, well, I've asked in the office downstairs for how much the base pays.
Okay.
And so, but
Okay. Thank you, Sandra. Any further comments, discussion from the board?
No.
Okay. So we are looking here for a motion to award the base bid to White Construction, subject to the approval and sale of, or approval from the RDC and sale of the bonds, as well as the cash for the contingency as well. Is that something that's what we talked about, Rob?
Yes, that's accurate. And then just, again, Kevin talked about this earlier, but a notice to proceed will not be issued until the issue, if approved by this board, until the issuance of the bonds.
Okay, so,
And approval of the RDC.
Yes.
Correct. Yep.
okay. So, do you need that all in a motion, Tanya?
I did, but I'll listen to it later.
Okay, so looking for a motion to award the base bid for the downtown streetscape base bid to White Construction for $7,193,000 with subject to the approval of the RDC and sale of subsequent bonds, and notice to proceed will not be issued until the sale is complete. Is that good, Rob? Okay, so we have a motion, so I need somebody to say so moved.
So moved.
So moved from Bill. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. That's Alan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Bid is awarded to White Construction. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. Thank you, board. Okay. Any other, we don't have any claims. It's a special meeting, so is any other new business come before the board?
No.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thanks for watching. The Planning Commission will begin shortly.